Hi, everyone, again. Today I'm going to talk about designing for reintegration, or a case study around the North American beaver. Part of this work that I have been a part of over the past 5 or 6 years is really exploring within the city of Seattle and surrounding metropolitan region, different ways in which we can manage for beaver populations that are highly active and recolonizing areas that they haven't been in for several decades. And so part of my work within this, as both a wildlife ecologist and as a designer, is to think about how we can design for these species and design to help engage the opportunities that beaver provide for ecosystem services and for urban environments. Prior to Euro-American colonization, North American beaver were widespread throughout parts of Mexico, through what we today know as the United States, and as well as much of Canada. As many people know, that beaver were highly prized for their pelts or for their fur, and for other reasons, including being viewed as a nuisance to development. Were commonly trapped and killed and removed. And so estimates were 60 to 400 million beaver in the on the North American continent. And then within a few decades, really, beaver populations had been decimated to the point that only about 10% remained. Yet, despite all of this heavy trapping, beaver continued to persist and show up in really interesting places. So, for example, for the first time in 200 years, a beaver was identified in the Hudson River, just off of Manhattan, in 2007. And this again was the first time in more than 2 centuries that a beaver was seen in this area. And so, what we're beginning to see is beaver were beginning to repopulate in areas that were more urban and more heavily developed than we had seen in the past. During this time, we also started to take approaches that were less lethal for trapping beaver, and more of kind of capturing them in cages and relocating them into different places through non-lethal means. And the approach to this was really, so obviously, not to decimate the beaver population, but to keep them out of the areas that we were trying to manage more concisely in terms of our water environments in our built-up areas. But why do we do this? Well, we do this because beaver ecosystem engineers is the common term that's used for them, meaning that their activities and their approaches to kind of managing stream environments actively alter hydrology and can have impacts to private property and public infrastructure. The image shown here is actually a news shot from 2012 here in Washington State, when a beaver dam upstream of this property broke and actually created a 5-foot wall of water and mud that came through this property, ultimately damaging the property pretty severely and impacting public infrastructure around it. Yet there's a lot of research, as I've been articulating as well, that while beaver do have these impacts on our built environments, they're also ecosystem engineers and are part of that cycle that really helps to make rivers and stream systems more resilient, more biodiverse, and more ecologically healthy. We can look at this chart and see a variety of different benefits and services from an ecosystem perspective that beaver provide, everything from wetland and floodplain connectivity to adding stream complexity, to increasing biodiversity and species diversity, and to reestablishing near stream environments such as riparian vegetation and different buffer zones along waterways. In 2014, I started to work with a team of beaver ecologists here at the University of Washington. And part of this work was really in going out across and looking across the city of Seattle and identifying areas that it was obvious that beaver had already recolonized the spaces, or were locations that might be good habitat in the future for beaver to recolonize or reintegrate into the urban fabric. This mapping led to conversations across the city with designers about how they begin to engage with this knowledge that beaver might be impacting their projects down the road. And our conversations were really based on understanding how designers were approaching this potential for change of what they were designing for. And through these pretty extensive interviews and conversations we had with these designers, but also with different scientists, we identified a set of approaches that we encourage designers to really think about when engaging with any project that might be impacted by beaver down the road. And and from top to bottom, left to right, really is about designing without considering beaver recolonization. What are some of the impacts that could be associated with that? Designs that would allow for the potential of beavers to recolonize an area, and then designs that require a beaver to recolonize an area. And the designs that require the designs that have the elements that would require beaver to recolonize are more of setting the stage for the beaver populations to come in with the expectation that they would really transform the area. This oftentimes requires a lot more space than we have in our kind of densely built urban environments. One of the case studies that we looked for as part of this was Magnuson Park. It's an old military base in Seattle, Washington, on the shores of Lake Washington, and it's a really large complex that was being redesigned for a variety of different public purposes. What's not shown on this map is a whole series of buildings that were part of the military complex. There's a lot of sports fields here. There's dog parks here. It's a really large open space, 154 acres of open space within the city. Part of what the design team here was really considering and interested in was how do they begin to design to allow for beaver recolonization in this area. And so what the previous map showed was the design of more of a set of ponds that would serve to capture stormwater overflow and allow that stormwater to filter through these ponds to improve water quality. This was the real focus for the design team, where beaver might be able to colonize this particular area. And so the design was really set up to function from the day it opened as a set of stormwater detention ponds, but also recognizing that the hydrology of the area was likely to change, and if beaver did recolonize, it would just be a benefit to that overall environment. And then within 2 years, a family of beaver had moved in and made it their home, and really began to address the hydrology of the area. One of the great parts of this project with Berger Partnership and the scientists they were working with was really to actively manage the site and to recognize where there were going to be impacts to public access based on the beaver activities, and to design around some of those impacts. And so accommodating trails, moving trails, planting different species that beaver would either be attracted to or not attracted to, and really beginning to work through how to set up the environment to accommodate the beaver and embrace the beaver family in the area, while also supporting the public. As part of this, there's a lot of biodiversity really began to show up in this area. The different environments that the beaver created offered opportunities for fish, amphibians, and birds and mammals as well to really begin to inhabit the site. And so when we start to think about some of the lessons learned from that research and the engagements with designers and scientists, some of the things that we drew out was a real need to approach design and management collaboratively. One of the great aspects of this type of work is to seek to bridge science and design. So take the knowledge of sciences and bridge with design activities. And so that collaborative opportunity to think through the requirements of the beaver and potential impacts of the beaver on the overall area was a really key element in all of the case studies we looked at, including Magnuson Park. And as part of that, from a design team's perspective, needing to design to anticipate change, recognizing that change is going to occur, and especially if beavers begin to reintegrate into this area or recolonize this area, how do you design to enable that or allow for that accommodation? And then once the beaver do arrive, how do you provide active and ongoing management of these areas, recognizing that while the beaver might make changes, they might make changes that you didn't necessarily anticipate, or build in the capacity to accommodate right away. And so through active management, you can work to identify different strategies. And the final real lessons learned is um, working to educate the public about beaver and about this type of work, and how do we embrace beaver as a neighbor within our community, and how do we work together with the public and with other species to really increase the health of our environments, especially within our cities. So thank you all very much. I really appreciate your time, and I hope you learned a little something.